I was reading short stories. Can you hear me all right, everybody?
Yeah.
I was reading short stories at libraries done it for 15 years. 3 or 4, before the damn COVID came in and ruined our lives, and then we went to Zoom for everybody. But a ham actor loves a live audience. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I was reading a Hemingway story, dramatic one, at the Pound Ridge Library, and 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. One little old lady shows up. That was my audience. One lady, and she was hard of hearing. So I moved her up right here, moved her chair right in front of me, so she could hear. And she was a delightful audience. When the woman shoots her husband and kills him, she is so into it. It was just, she was delightful. Absolutely delightful. But it's interesting to me, because I've read to a lot of audiences, short stories. Nobody wants to sit in the front row. I wonder what that is psychologically. You started and then you moved back to a safer territory.
I think people feel exposed.
Yeah.
Like you'll be watching their reactions.
Want to wait a few minutes?
Yeah, I think we better wait till 4 minutes.
Yeah, there's
It'll be
always
7 o'clock.
late people always come in. The people who come in late get rewarded. We wait for them. The people who come on time or early are penalized. They have to sit and wait till the late comes. I never thought that was fair, but
Well, we're not
we
going to
go
wait
fair
for
in life.
it. I already took care of that. I'm telling you all the wrong time.
Very clever.
It is clever.
Lucy, did they all sign the agreement that they would laugh at the right places? If
Well, I
not,
don't know if they're going to
out.
laugh.
You're gonna have the chops. You're going to too, right?
So that
When you say that on the time of
they're not going to get
life.
us.
Oh my gosh, in the games, sports games, recorded and then you realize the camera.
Yeah. We'll just scream.
Yes.
Two minutes, people.
2 minutes.
So Tom, I got your email about the voting registration. That is fine.
Since I don't bother Lucy enough,
I don't either.
I'm now involved in the voter registration in September for the meeting.
Excellent, good.
You did that last year, didn't you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got it wrong. That's why I joined the League of Women Voters in the first place. It's just that they got me doing like 100 other things since then, but voter registration is the joy.
1 minute. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Good evening, thank you for coming tonight. I'm Lucy Handley, the adult programmer here at the Ridgefield Library. Dartmouth graduate Alan Sklar has been a professional voice actor and narrator for over 30 years. His career primarily consists of narrating non-broadcast videos for corporate, medical, and financial clientele. He's voiced hundreds of such projects. He's narrated over 200 audiobooks, most of which are available in the Westchester Library System. Are they also available here?
no.
Oh.
Yes.
Radio and TV commercials also make up a good part of his career. He's currently the spokesman for a top-selling video game, Clash of Clans, and has narrated over 20 sleep stories for Calm.com, an internet company helping Americans get a better night's sleep. For over 3 years, he reported to work daily at the WPIX TV studio, Channel 11, on East 42nd Street, where he was employed as an announcer. You may have heard him say, "This portion of the news is brought to you by AT&T, the right choice." He confesses that his dream is to be an opera singer. Italian repertoire, please. He can often be heard honing his bass-baritone operatic skills in the upstairs shower of his Westchester home. You can learn more about this talented gentleman by visiting his website, www.alansklar.com. Now, would everyone please turn off your cell phones? Welcome, Alan Sklar.
Lucy, thank you so much. I had a friend, one of my classmates in high school turned out to be an opera singer. God, he was wonderful. Taught me so much about opera. So let's go back to September of 1952, when I was a freshman at Dartmouth College, and I sat in the audience at Webster Hall with several hundred other Dartmouth freshmen, 18-year-old boys, to hear Robert Frost speak and read some of his poems. I remember him as a short man who, when he stood behind the lectern and microphone, all you could see was his white hair. But when he opened his mouth and read, he grew to be 10 feet tall and knocked the ball out of the park. Some say the world will end in fire. Some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. Frost wrote Fire and Ice in 1920, 2 years after the end of the First World War, at a time when the revolution and apocalypse and social and political chaos were on many people's minds. Now here's something I bet none of you know. Frost's father, William Prescott Frost Jr., born in 1850, 10 years before the beginning of the Civil War, he ran away from home as a teenager in an attempt to join the Confederate Army. He was caught and returned to his parents. But the elder Frost never forgot his war heroes, especially were General Robert E. Lee, eventually naming his son after him, Robert Lee Frost. Sometimes a little thing can change your day from a negative to a positive experience. The way a crow shook down on me the dust of snow from a hemlock tree has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had rued. Dust of snow. The pasture. I'm going out to clean the pasture spring. I'll only stop to rake the leaves away and wait to watch the water clear, I may. I shan't be gone long. You come too. I'm going out to fetch the little calf that's standing by his mother. It's so young, he totters when she licks it with her tongue. I shan't be gone long. You come too. Frost was a college dropout twice. First, he attended Dartmouth. Dartmouth always salutes him as one of their sons, but he only attended Dartmouth for 2 months. Later explaining, I wasn't suited for that place. He got his second chance in 1897 at Harvard, but only made it for 2 years before dropping out to support his wife and child. They could not make a student of me here, but they gave it their best, he said. Still, he managed to get a degree anyway. Harvard bestowed honorary honors upon him in 1937. Gathering leaves. Spades take up leaves no better than spoons, and bags full of leaves are light as balloons. I make a great noise of rustling all day, like rabbit and deer running away. But the mountains I raise elude my embrace, flowing over my arms and into my face. I may load and unload again and again till I fill the whole shed. But what have I then? Next to nothing for weight. And since they grew duller from contact with earth, next to nothing for color. Next to nothing for use. But a crop is a crop, and who's to say where the harvest shall stop? His most famous poem is The Road Not Taken. It's often read at high school and college graduations as a reminder to forge new paths. But Frost never intended it to be taken seriously. He wrote it as a private joke for his friend Edward Thomas. They enjoyed walks together, and Thomas was constantly indecisive about which direction to go. And when he finally did choose, he often regretted not choosing the other way. The road not taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though, as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Stopping by the woods on a snowy evening. Frost wrote this poem, considered by many to be his masterpiece, in 1922. He wrote it in just 20 minutes, after a long night of working on a much longer poem. The poem was inspired by a real event in his life. Stopping by the woods on his way home, the poet despaired that he was poor, didn't have enough money to provide for his family. But rather than give up, he decided to soldier on and choose life rather than the tempting escape offered by the woods. Everything else is silent around him, apart from the soft wind and the slight sound of snowfall. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. Beyond the other sounds, the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark, and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. The Runaway begins with the speaker describing the snowy setting of the poem and his initial encounter with a young male horse. The animal appears to be quite friendly, but then all of a sudden he bolts, After running into the distance, the speaker comes to the conclusion that the colt is afraid of the snow. There are no other creatures in the pasture, and he wonders who's taking care of the animal and who will teach him what snow is. The runaway ends with the horses return to the wall and the speaker's gentle condemnation of his owners. Once, when the snow of the year was beginning to fall, we stopped by a mountain pasture to say, "Who's cold?" A little Morgan had one forefoot on the wall, the other curled at his breast. He dipped his head and snorted at us, and then he had to bolt. We heard the miniature thunder where he fled, and we saw him, or thought we saw him, dim and gray, like a shadow against the curtain of falling flakes. I think the little fellow's afraid of the snow. He isn't winter broken. It isn't play with the little fellow at all. He's running away. I doubt if even his mother could tell him, "Sakes, it's only weather." He'd think she didn't know. Where is his mother? He can't be out alone. And now he comes again with a clatter of stone and mounts the wall again with whited eyes, and all his tail that isn't hair straight up. He shudders his coat as if to throw off flies. Whoever it is that leaves him out so late when other creatures have gone to stall and bin ought to be told to come and take him in. One of Frost's most famous poems, The Mending Wall, is about the human race's primitive urge to mark its territory and our fondness for setting clear boundaries for our horses. I've spent my entire life living in Westchester and New England, and I've seen an awful lot of stone walls in my time. And so many of them are all fallen down. No one has repaired them. Maybe they were built by some farmer back in 1700. The poem describes how the speaker and a neighbor meet to rebuild a stone wall between their properties, a ritual repeated every spring. The speaker considers the purpose of borders between people and the value of human work. Mending the wall serves both to separate and to join the two neighbors. Another contradiction. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends the frozen ground swell under it and spills the upper boulders in the sun, and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The work of hunters is another thing. I have come after them and made repair, where they have left not one stone on a stone, but they would have the rabbit out of hiding to please the yelping dogs. The gaps I mean, no one has seen them made or heard them made. But at spring mending time, we find them there. I let my neighbor know beyond the hill, and on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go, to each the boulders that have fallen, to each. And some are loaves, and some so nearly balls, we have to use a spell to make them balance. Stay where you are until our backs are turned. We wear our fingers rough with handling. Oh, just another kind of outdoor game. One on the side, it comes to little more. There where it is we do not need the wall, he is all pine, and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. He only says, well, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But here there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down. I could say elves to him, but it's not elves exactly. And I'd rather he said it for himself. I see him there bringing a stone grasped firmly by the top in each hand, like an old stone savage armed. He moves in darkness, as it seems to me, not of woods only and the shade of trees. He will not go behind his father's saying, and he likes having thought of it so well. He says again, well, good fences make good neighbors. Hila Brook. Born in San Francisco in 1874, Frost lived and taught for many years in Massachusetts and Vermont. He died in Boston in 1963 at the age of 89 years old. Hila Brook appeared in 1916. This poem is about a brook named for the frogs that breed there. The speaker describes elements of the brook that are lodged in his memory. In Hila Brook, a dry steam stream bed reminds the speaker of the song and speed of the brook in an earlier time when it still flowed. The unidentified speaker in the poem's opening line calls his subject our brook, as indeed it was. The brook is on the property of the Robert Frost Farm in Derry, New Hampshire, where the poet and his family lived from 1900 to 1911. Readers can visit the brook and even stand in the dry brook bed. A literary group, the Hila Brook Poets, meets once a month at the farm and conducts a competition each year for the best submission of a theatrical poem. The farm is open to visitors. By June, our brooks run out of song and speed. Sought for much after that, it will be found either to have gone groping underground and taken with it all the Hila breed that shouted in the mist a month ago, like ghost of sleigh bells in a ghost of snow, or flourished and come up in jewel weed, weak foliage that is blown upon and bent even against the way its waters went. Its bed is left a faded paper sheet of dead leaves stuck together by the heat, a brook to none but who remember long. This, as it will be seen, is other far than with brooks taken otherwhere in song. We love the things we love for what they are. The speaker in Two Tramps in Mud Time creates a little drama focusing on his encounter with two unemployed lumberjacks who covet the speaker's wood-splitting task. Labeling them as tramps, the speaker then offers a fascinating philosophical take on his reason for choosing to continue his chore, instead of turning it over to these two needy individuals. Two Tramps in Mud Time. Out of the mud, two strangers came and caught me splitting wood in the yard, and one of them put me off my aim by hailing cheerily, "Hit them hard!" I knew pretty well why he had dropped behind and let the other go on its way. I knew pretty well what he had in mind. He wanted to take my job for pay. Good blocks of oak it was I split, as large around as the chopping block. And every piece I squarely hit fell splinterless as a cloven rock. The blows that a life of self-control spares to strike for the common good, that day, giving a loose to my soul, I spent on the unimportant wood. The sun was warm, but the wind was chill. You know how it is with an April day, when the sun is out and the wind is still. You're 1 month on in the middle of May. But if you so much as dare to speak, a cloud comes over the sunlit arch, a wind comes off a frozen peak, and you're 2 months back in the middle of March. The bluebird comes tenderly up to a light and turns to the wind to unruffle the plume. His song, so pitched as not to excite a single flower as yet to bloom. It is snowing a flake, and he half knew winter was only playing possum. Except in color, he isn't blue, but he wouldn't advise a thing to blossom. The water for which we may have to look in summertime with a witching wand. In every wheel rut's now a brook, in every print of a hoof, a pond. Be glad of water, but don't forget the lurking frost in the earth beneath that will steal forth after the sun is set and show on the water its crystal teeth. The time when most I loved my task, the two must make me love it more by coming with what they came to ask. You'd think I never had felt before the weight of an axe head poised aloft, the grip of earth on outspread feet, the life of muscles rocking soft and smooth and moist in vernal heat. Out of the wood, 2 hulking tramps from sleeping God knows where last night, but not long since in the lumber camps. They thought old chopping was theirs, of right. Men of the woods and lumberjacks, they judged me by their appropriate tool. Except as a fellow handled an axe, they had no way of knowing a fool. Nothing on either side was said. They knew they had but to stay their stay, and all their logic would fill my head as that I had no right to play with what was another man's work for gain. My right might be love, but theirs was need, and where the two exist in twain, theirs was the better right, agreed. But yield who will to their separation, my object in living is to unite my avocation and my vocation, as my 2 eyes make one in sight. Only where love and need are one, and the work is play for mortal stakes, is the deed ever really done for heaven and the future's sakes. He wasn't much of a farmer, according to his neighbors. Though Frost adored living the bucolic life on his 30-acre farm in Derry, New Hampshire, his neighbors weren't exactly impressed with his farming skills, because Frost mostly paid his bills with poetry. He didn't have to be as regimented about farm life as his full-time farming neighbors did. And they thought he was a bit lazy. After apple picking, 2 long, 2-pointed ladders sticking through a tree toward heaven still. And there's a barrel that I didn't fit. But I am done with apple picking now. Essence of winter sleep is on the night. The scent of apples I'm drowsing off. I cannot rub the strangeness from my sight. I got from looking through a pane of glass I skimmed this morning from the drinking trough and held against a world of hoary grass. It melted, and I let it fall and break. But I was well upon my way to sleep before it fell, and I could tell what form my dreaming was about to take. Magnified apples appear and disappear, stem end and blossom end, and every fleck of russet showing clear. My instep arch not only keeps the ache, it keeps the pressure of a ladder round. I feel the sway as the boughs bend, and I keep hearing from the cellar bin the rumbling sound of load on load of apples coming in. For I have had too much of apple picking. I am overtired of the great harvest I myself desired. And there were 10,000 fruit to touch, cherish in hand, lift down and not let fall. For all that struck the earth, no matter if not bruised or spiked with stubble, went surely to the cider apple heap as of no worth. One can see what will trouble this sleep of mine, whatever sleep it is. Were he not gone, the woodchuck could say whether it's like his long sleep, as I describe its coming on, or just some human sleep. Birches. In the poem, the act of swinging on birch trees is presented as a way to escape the hard rationality or truth of the adult world, if only for a moment. As the boy climbs up the tree, he is climbing toward heaven and a place where his imagination can be free. Even though the speaker knows that the birch trees are bent because they're covered in ice, the speaker prefers to think that a boy has been swinging through them and causing them to droop. This, in turn, is a sign that the speaker is nostalgic for childhood and wants to ignore the boring details of everyday life. Birches. When I see birches bend to left and right, across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay, as ice storms do. Often you must have seen them loaded with ice, a sunny winter morning after a rain. They click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away, you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break. Or once they are bound so low for long, they never right themselves. You may see their trunks arching in the woods years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. But I was going to say, when truth broke in with all her matter of fact about the ice storm, I should prefer to have some boy bend them as he went out and in to fetch the cows, some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. One by one, he subdued his father's trees by riding them down over and over again until he took the stiffness out of them. and not one but hung limp. Not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon, and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains you use to fill a cup up to the brim and even over above the brim. And then he flung outward feet first with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So was I once myself, a swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to be. It's when I'm weary of considerations and life is too much like a pathless wood, where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twig's having lashed across it open. I'd like to get away from earth a while, and then come back to it and begin over. May no fate willfully misunderstand me and half grant what I wish and snatch me away not to return. Earth's the right place to love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb black branches up a snow-white trunk toward heaven till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. Frost wrote over 100 poems. One quote of his: "The utmost of ambition is to lodge a few poems where they will be hard to get rid of." And the inscription on his tombstone in his own words: "The lesson for today, here's the whole thing. And were an epitaph to be my story, I'd have a short one ready for my own. I would have written of me on my stone, I had a lover's quarrel with the world." I hope you enjoyed that.